So thank you, Jody, and thank you to these institutions. And let's get started here. I'm here to represent these women. And I've got a little special surprise for you. We're going to lock the doors and have a contest. There are 3 Tennessee women in this picture. In order to get out of the room at the end, you have to identify them. Are you ready? Okay, a couple of things about terminology. The women who played in this league, well, some of them were as young as 15, some of them were as old as 29, and they consistently referred to themselves as the girls. So I am going to refer to them as the girls, not because I'm a sexist, white, entitled man, but because that's what they call themselves. Also, they played for the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, which you are going to get as tired of hearing me say as I'm going to get saying it. Well, they simply called it the league. So I'm going to talk a lot about the girls and the league. And the logo that you're looking at is the one that they adopted in the 1980s when they set up their association. And I mention that because during the time, the league had 3 different business structures and maybe a half a dozen different names. So it gets very confusing. So we're going to stick with the girls and the league. So before I get into talking about the women, I want to give you a little context, background as to how this league came about, because it's pretty unique and it hasn't been replicated since. And there are 3 essential reasons that had to happen at the same time. There had to be a vibrant softball culture in America. I'll get back to that in a moment. World War II. Why World War II? Well, I'm talking about a major disruption to the culture. Something that we experienced in our own lifetimes a few years ago with the pandemic. A very similar challenge for businesses, World War II did. And then we have to have Philip K. Wrigley, all the baseball fans in the room know who he is, the Chicago Cubs and Wrigley Chewing Gum. He is really the catalyst behind all of this. So let's start a little bit with softball in America. You go next door, you're going to hear, you can learn about where and when baseball came into being. It seems to be lost in the mists of history, as we like to say, when there is no clear-cut answer to the question. Do you know where and when softball happened? It happened on a Thursday afternoon. It happened to be Thanksgiving, 1887, in this wonderful little fantasy pastiche of a Romanesque playhouse for the rich elite of Chicago, where a group of college men were bored in the afternoon and created a sport they called indoor baseball. Within a week, they had a rule book. It caught on. It started spreading. And being Americans, it got adapted and called all kinds of things. Kitty ball, pumpkin ball, cabbage ball. They even called it baseball. Although how you're playing baseball inside with a stick and a boxing glove, which was the original equipment, there's a story there. I don't know. It spread across the country, but it didn't start to be called softball until 1926, when one of the many attempts to codify the rules and get everybody on the same page happened. Well, the rules didn't stick, but the name softball did. In 1933 at the Chicago World's Fair, they tried to have a national championship tournament. They had 55 teams show up, 12 of them were women's teams, and they had almost as many sets of rules, equipment, and base sizes. So you got one more attempt. And the Amateur Softball Association formed, set up a set of rules that people started to adopt, and it took off across the country. So you can see from the slide, by 1936, tens of thousands of teams, millions of people playing softball. They even had lighted fields. If this hadn't happened, there wouldn't have been a professional baseball league a half a decade later. We'll come back to that. So it's because where was Wrigley going to find women baseball players? Well, they had no opportunities to play, so without this softball culture, there wouldn't have been players to recruit. World War II, we all know, I think, the disruption that it caused with all the men going away, being mobilized. Women had to step and move into the workforce. Well, that also included entertainment. the men left the ball field, the women went onto the ball field to play. So you have that as the second part. The third part is Philip K. Wrigley. He is the son of the founder of the Wrigley Chewing Gum fortune and the Chicago Cubs. A businessman, a smart guy, and he had the vision, the means, and the money to pull this off. When I say vision, he was already thinking that there was an opportunity to expand women's softball. He owned a field out in the Los Angeles area where they had 30,000 people attend a softball championship. That's what's showing up for a major league game. He lived in Chicago, the birthplace of softball, with an extremely vibrant softball culture at the time. I don't have the time to go into the conflict that arose between Wrigley's league and the local softball teams. They were not happy with what he did. But he also had the means, and by the means, he is already a baseball man. From the time he decided to move forward with this league to the time they were on the field playing 4 teams in 4 separate cities is 15 months. That is an accomplishment. And he managed it because he was a baseball man. He already knew the business. He had the contacts, the front of office people, the scouts. He knew where to go to look for the players. And most importantly, he was rich. He had money. He spent at least $100,000 the first year, probably more the second. $100,000 in 1943 is the equivalent of $2 million today. Now, his original focus was to get a substitute for men's baseball. When that didn't happen, when President Roosevelt declared that baseball was an essential activity and it must continue, Wrigley didn't give up on his girls' plan. He simply shifted it to a patriotic war effort. He put the 4 teams in mid-sized industrial cities that had a strong workforce that needed recreational activity. So what did Wrigley come up with? Now, I can talk about a lot of stuff, but I'm going to focus on the women and what they had to put up with because I'm here to talk about the Tennessee women. He was deeply concerned, being the patriarch that he was, that women remained feminine and did not become masculinized by playing a men's sport. So he put an emphasis on this. If you've seen the movie A League of Their Own, you know where I'm going. The most obvious thing is charm school. A lot has been written and a lot of ridicule has gone about it. It really depends on whether you are a 15-year-old farm girl who's never been to the big city, or whether you're a 22-year-old Chicago girl who grew up in the city, whether charm school was important to you. Many of these women, they learned a lot of life skills that they had not encountered yet. For a lot of other women, like Marjorie Hood from Tennessee, who was the oldest woman to play in the league, she's 29, she's married, she's got a 6-year-old. Doesn't really need charm school at this point. To go with it, there were the rules of conduct that you would never find imposed on a men's baseball team. There were curfews, there were dress codes. Well, for one thing, men are never asked to wear makeup while they're playing, or when they're off the field, or to never appear in public in shorts or slacks, but only in an appropriate skirt. They went through, they had curfews. They also had to have all of their social engagements approved by the team. If they wanted to go on a date, they had to get permission. Who did that? Something else you won't find in men's baseball, chaperones. Oddly enough, they were absolutely necessary given the culture at the time and the age of the women. The average age on the teams was 20 to 21 years old. But on almost every team, a third to half of the players were under 20. I already mentioned the youngest was 15. You might have 15 players on your team and 5 of them are 17, 18, and 19 years old. Do you think they would benefit from an older woman looking out for their interests amongst these 22 and 23 and 24-year-old women who are experienced in life. Some of the women would not have been allowed to go if there weren't chaperones. One of them is Mary Nesbitt from Chattanooga, who we'll talk about briefly. But the thing that most people know about the game are the uniforms. So let's go there. It's a nice outfit, a tunic-style skirt, or a tunic-style dress with a flared skirt. They had cover-up shorts to go underneath, typical baseball athletic socks, and a matching cap to go with their uniform. Here they're modeling the early version of the uniform. You'll notice the logo in the front is actually for the All-American Girls Softball League. That was the first name, and Wrigley figured out that wasn't going to work and changed it. Afterwards, they put a team patch there. Here's the contrast between what other women's softball players were wearing, as you can see on the right, and what Wrigley expected his players to wear. Here's the result on the field. Does she look happy? The reality is that many of these women had what large open sores on their thighs called raspberries. Some of them had them the entire season. They couldn't keep a bandage on because they essentially are playing with bare legs. You can see the result. So they had to put up with a lot to get on this field. And almost to a woman, they say, I put up with it because I'm getting to do what I love and I'm getting paid to do it. And many of these women, some of them teenagers, were being paid more on a weekly basis than their fathers were earning. Some of them put that money away and financed a college education, helped the family buy a home, do other things with that money. So it made a significant impact in their lives. So just to summarize the league in total, it existed for 12 years, from 1943 to 1954. There were 15 teams, played in 14 cities. Any given year, there were 4 to 10 teams on the field. Over 800 women total played in the league. There is no complete roster. They were somewhat cruel. If you appeared in less than 10 games, they didn't keep your records. There were a lot of women that fell into that category whose names are lost because of that. And then they came from all over the United States. Despite the All-American label, they came from Canada, Mexico. There was even a contingent from Cuba. You'll find out why in a minute. And of course, the volunteer state was there in force. So let's meet the players from Tennessee. 11 women joined the league. They basically came in 2 ways. There was heavy recruiting in 1943, and we had 7 women come up at that time. With the war winding down in 45, there was another recruiting effort. We had one girl go up in 45, another in 46, and 2 more in 47. That's the 11 individuals. Some of them stayed for a number of years. So you had 4 who were 1 year and done, 1 and done or even less. Not the least bit uncommon. 4 of them played for 2 or 3 years, and 3 of them played for 6 or more years. By comparison, the average Major League Baseball career is about 5.5 years. Using just these 11 players and their dates, you get an average of 3.5 years, of which none of these players actually played. But we had 3 who stayed 6, 8, and 9 years, and then the others were short-timers. Where did they come from? Essentially 3 parts of the state: Nashville, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. I do not know why no one from Memphis ended up in the game. They did recruit in the area, as far as I can tell. Really no explanation for that. So I'm going to quickly go through and talk about some of these girls and get to the Knoxville lassies, because I know that's why some of you are here. Chattanooga sent up 5 players total. 4 of them were up there in the first season. The top 3 that you see across here became well known as the Chattanooga Choo-Choos. They all played with the Racine Bells. The Racine Bells dominated the first year. Hollywood made a great movie out of a league of their own. They did a fair job of depicting what took place on the field. Everything else was fiction. Oh, if they had just done the story of the Racine Bells' first year in the league, I think they would have had a better movie. Here they are. 4 Tennessee women were in the starting lineup for the Bells when they opened their home game. They didn't open at home. So they were a dominant force. Here is little Mary Nesbitt. I mentioned her before. When she was offered an opportunity to go to the league, she turned them down because she didn't think it was appropriate for a 17-year-old girl to travel by herself to Chicago, Illinois, and stay in a hotel room for a week by herself. They had to send the chief scout back down to negotiate with her family. They got her grandmother to go up with her for the auditions. When her brother got out of school, he came in personally, chaperoned her that first season. He became a mascot to the Racine Bells. I mentioned Mary because she was a left-handed pitcher and charming. She charmed the socks off of these Midwesterners with her southern drawl, her soft-spoken way, and her dominance on the mound. She and Irene Hickson, also from Chattanooga, made up what was called the Chattanooga Battery. At one point, Mary won something like 10 games in a row. They won the first half of the contest, and they dominated in the championship. Mary won 2 of the 3 games, and she saved the 3rd one. Irene Hickson was catching for her the whole time. Charlotte Smith was also with her. She was also a choo-choo. She was 25 when she went up, and unfortunately her age and injury got the better of her. She was playing second base right before the 4th of July, and she was in a takeout play. They got her legs. She never really recovered, played another year, and then retired from the game. Dottie Montgomery, all these women, one thing they made fun of in the movie was, if you don't know the name of a player in the league, call her Dottie, because the odds are pretty good that was her name. Lots of Dotties. So this is Monty. Monty passed on going up in 43 to stay in college and get her BS. Mary Nesbitt said, hey, come on up and play. So in 45 she went up. She had an uneven experience. She got cut the first year, played a full season the next year, and then she had an experience of the opportunity of a lifetime to go to Havana, Cuba for spring training, but she got cut at the end of that season. So 3 years in the league, only 1 year playing. At the end of it, this is how she summed it up. I just didn't want it bad enough. She went on to have a good career as a medical technologist. Marjorie Margie Hood, I tell you what, this woman is made of grit. She is the oldest player in the league. She's 29 years old, 29 years, 9 months, and 14 days when she started in the league. She turned 30 while she was playing. She was 2 years older than the next oldest player in the league, Irene Hickson. Is anybody surprised that there are Tennessee women who are doing this? Not me. She had a 6-year-old, been married for years, and she might have succeeded, except she sprained her ankle in spring training. For those of you who know baseball, you know what a sore ankle does to your hitting. She was great playing in the outfield. When she connected at the plate, she hit for power, did a good job running the bases. The problem was she struck out half the time. Nobody can handle her. She got released from one team, picked up, played for another team, traded, was there at the end of the year, played for 3 teams, didn't get a new contract. She took her shot. Came a little too late for her. On to Nashville. So we got 3 players here. Would it surprise you that 2 of them were teammates? Mary Louise Lester and Lillian Jackson played together. City championship teams, competed for state championships. But as was typical, they ended up competitors in the league. Bird Dog Jackson, love that nickname. She played 3 seasons for 3 different teams, moved over to Chicago to play with the Metropolitan Girls League there, made a life there. At the end, when the 1980s, the girls got together to start forming their association, she was one of the officers and was essential in putting it together. Lou Lester, she just played 2 years, but she did have an opportunity to be on a championship team. And she left, returned to Nashville, but she stayed in sports. She became an executive director of one of Nashville's many recreation centers and spent her career bringing other children the joy of sports. Martha Torchiwala, boy oh boy, if there was ever anybody who was treated unfairly and had something to complain about, it's this woman. She ended up being the pawn between the manager of the Racine Bells and the president of the league, much to her detriment. They left her in a game they should have taken her out of to make a point, and she has gone in the record book with having given up 19 runs, 21 walks, with a 1-game appearance and a lifetime earned run average of 17.26. Never should have been called up. Didn't stop her. She went over to Chicago to the Girls Metropolitan Softball League, played there for a number of years, made a life in Chicago, and according to her brother's tribute page, had a wonderful life. Few people could recover from what she went through. All right, this is why you're all here. 3 women from Knoxville, and they're special. The Knoxville Lassies, as the papers called them. Kay Malik, Doris Sands, and Cartha Duell. They were all teammates together a couple of years before they went up in the league. Doris went up first in 46, came back and said, "You all gotta come. You gotta try out. You gotta come with me." So they both tried out, they both made the team, and you have a picture of them here. This is what Wrigley wanted in his feminine baseball players. Here they are, dressed as if they're going to go to church, all prim and proper, but look at what they're holding. They got a baseball glove on one end and a ball in the other, and they're getting ready to get on a train for Miami, Florida, where they're going to get on a TWA plane and fly to Havana, Cuba for 2 weeks of spring training. There's a movie in this just in itself. What happened in Havana mostly stayed in Havana. One thing I will say for these women, they saw themselves not as individual competitors, but as pioneers, and they stood shoulder to shoulder. And if they decided not to talk about it, they did not talk about it. They could keep their secrets, and they took them to the grave. And there are some that I wish I knew, because I've been trying to puzzle them out. But it was quite a trip down there in Cuba. They got split up. Doris went back to the Muskegon Lassies that she was with. Cartha, who I'll come to last, went to play for the Rockford Peaches, who were immortalized in the movie. And then Kay Malik, she went to play for the Fort Wayne Daisies. Kay was an excellent ball player, not a native Tennessean. She actually was from upstate Illinois, west of Chicago. The family moved down here at the start of the war to seek work. Her father ended up at Over and Oak Ridge, later ORNL, in 43. She went to Catholic High, so she didn't immediately start playing in the community, but when she graduated from Catholic High, she played a couple of years with Cartha and Doris Sands. And Kay and Doris were just a powerhouse, hitting 1-2. You can read the stories in the Knoxville News Sentinel, where one of them's getting on and the other one's driving them in to win the game. It was a constant thing. Kay tore up the pea patch during the exhibition games that were played in Knoxville and Johnson City on their way to the start of the season. And then she kind of disappeared. She got in one game, but only because the outfielder that she filled in for got angry at the ump for being called out at second base and got thrown out of the game. She got one at bat and made it out. Then she got hurt and sat on the bench. And I tell you, I'm embarrassed as a historian and that I could not figure this out, but it never occurred to me what might happen to her and her career. And it took a family member to tell me when I said, what kind of injury did she have that ended her career? Well, unbeknownst to almost everyone, Kay had gotten married in August the year before. She didn't tell anybody. She's playing under her maiden name and, well, made a little whoopee before she went to Cuba and got pregnant. She had to, I don't know whether she got fired for signing a contract under her maiden name and not telling them she was married, or whether they just let her go because she was pregnant and couldn't play anymore. But she was done with the league, but don't feel bad about her. We're going to hear about her in a minute. Doris Sammy Sands. She is the greatest all-time female softball, baseball player that Tennessee's produced. Spent 8 years in the league, 6 times an all-star, 5 times as an outfielder, 1 time as a pitcher, 2-time MVP. She threw a perfect game. Recognized as an outstanding athlete from an early age. Multi-sport athlete. The town loved her. She made her pitching debut with an adult women's team when she was 11 years old. Mildred McDoyle was at first base. She got on the mound and something happened to her team that hadn't happened in a long time. They beat the city champions, the Goodall Girls. The Goodall Girls won the championship that year, and that's the last time they did. Doris Sands, leading Cole Nelson's Pepsi-Cola Girls, then won the next 6 out of 7 city championships. The one they didn't win was 1942, where for obvious reasons, there was no softball. The only reason they stopped winning was because in 46, she left to go pro. And Mildred Doyle left to become superintendent of elementary schools on the way to her legendary run with the school system. So she turned pro, and in 47, when she's up there with her 2 fellow teammates, she has a career year. They made a change to the pitching rules that favored Sands, and she dominated. 4-11, you can see that record up there, 4-11, look at that earned run average, less than 1. The only reason she didn't win the pitching championship, she didn't have 20 decisions to qualify. Through that perfect game, they selected her that year twice as an all-star. She was so good in the outfield as a hitter that they didn't want to leave her off the roster. But how do you not put a pitcher who throws a perfect game and has those kind of numbers up there? Well, you know what happens when you're league MVP? You get to be on the cover of Dell's Major League Baseball Digest. Now, I can look around the room and I know that all of you remember a time when we didn't have our magic oracles that we could look up everything. If you were a sports fan, you bought one of these books every year in order to keep up on the stats of what your teams were doing. And she graced the back cover of it. Well, 8 years she played, 5 years she played 2 positions. She pitched and she hit. After stopping as a pitcher, she just went to the outfield. Look at what happened to her batting numbers. When she stopped pitching, her average jumped up 30 points. Who knows what kind of numbers she would have been put up as a hitter if she had not been a pitcher too. And it's these numbers in this situation why she was compared to both Babe Ruth and Ted Williams, who she graced the cover with. She was a power-hitting pitcher, and then she was just a pure hitter. So when we hear all these people today, I'm multitasking this, I'm multitasking that. Doris Sands was a good, dominant pitcher in Knoxville. But in the league, she was just an average pitcher. Had she not split herself in two, there's no telling what she would have done. People need to think about that when they try to do 3 or 4 things at once. What are they leaving behind? Now let's talk about Cartha Ducky Doyle. Cartha is the third. She was the youngest Tennessean to go up in the league. She was just 17 years old at the time. And she was a junior in high school. She had to get permission to take her exams early so she could make the trip to Havana. And of course, she was a powerhouse second baseman. And excuse me just a moment here. And Cartha, like Doris, was recognized early for her talent. She started playing with Doris and her cousin Mildred at 14. And she stayed on the team until Doris went pro and the club, that particular team, fell apart. But she got selected, got to go to the Rockford Peaches. Here's a picture of her with her teammates. Cartha is up there in the upper right. Look at how young she looks compared to these other women. Sitting right in front of her with that cap on is Dorothy Cammie Kaminsky, first baseman. 10 years in the league, 8 times an All-Star. When they put together that All-Star 9, she's on it with Doris Sands. So Cartha got to play with one of the best in the league. But there is 6 years difference in their ages. It's a big thing for her. Cartha struggled initially while she was up there. She got hurt and was a while before she got in the game on a regular basis. But after the All-Star break in the middle, she took over as the everyday second baseman. And she was offered a contract to come back, and she declined. She has a simple, terse answer, which is her mother didn't want her to. There was a lot of family drama going on at the time, including the death of her father just the year before she went into the league at an early age. He was 49, a popular baseball player, manager of the team with a great name, the Frolic Nine. And he was also the assistant market manager for Market Square. Very popular, beloved man. Suddenly dropped dead of a massive heart attack. They named a ball field after him, the P. Doyle ball field. So there was drama at home. She was a little young, I think, to be going off, and well, she struggled. But she didn't leave the game. She came back. She turned 18 years old. On the day she turned 18, she married Albert Ab Childress. He was a manager of baseball teams, is well known to her. Obviously, she married her. And she finished her senior high in high school as Mrs. Childress. And the two of them she and her husband began to embark on an odyssey of fast-pitch softball. If you know your local politics, you know that the 1940s were not kind to Cant Walker. He had recently had a few incidents at the city council meeting, and I'm not sure whether or not he got expelled as mayor or what happened to him. He's on a redemption tour. He saw an opportunity with Ab and Cartha, and he created the Caz Walker Girls. Well, they're on another run. They're winning city titles. They're going for state championships. By 1950, Kay Malik, now divorced with 2 children, is back in town and back in the outfield playing with Cartha as they go on to win a state title. You know what Caz Walker does the next year? He drops the club. He got the trophy. He doesn't need him anymore. Cartha didn't stop, neither did they. They just kept doing one team after another until really fastball, softball faded away. They made it a family affair. Cartha stayed on the field as long as she could. A middle infielder, along with a catcher, they're the ones who lose their knees first. So her knees started going on her. So she started coaching, and she started managing with Ab running the team. And it was just too frustrating for her. I had the opportunity, courtesy of Jody Davis, to interview her 6 years ago. And she put it this way: those players wouldn't do what I told them to do, so I quit. Well, what do you do when the players won't tell you what to do? There is one position in the game where everybody has to listen to you. So in 1973, Cartha became a pioneer again, not really meaning to. She became one of the first 6 women to join the East Tennessee Umpires Association. And she stayed on the field as an umpire into her 60s. And simply by representation, by being on that field, other women saw her doing this job and followed her. There is a whole cohort of individuals that are women umpires because they saw Cartha on the field and followed her. And she stayed on that field until she was calling, she was at first base in a men's baseball championship team in Nashville. Foul ball came flying down the baseline. Cartha moved not fast enough, hit her in the knee. They had to carry her off the field. She said, if I'm too slow to get out of the way of a foul ball, I'm too slow to be an umpire. And she retired from the game. But I will tell you that the day that I went in to interview her, walked into her living room, she's sitting there watching TV. Do I need to tell you what was on the screen? So she was a doggone good umpire. And I've spent this time talking about Cartha because when you talk about the women and the impact they have and what they've accomplished, you cannot diminish what Doris Sands did on the field. She was an excellent athlete, and no fault on Doris. When she was done playing in the league, she was done. She didn't stay with the sport. She went on with her life doing other things. Cartha stayed with the sport of softball and baseball her entire life, and she made a significant contribution just by being a woman in men's roles within the game, which is why I wanted to close with her. And we'll go on and do a summary here. In total, there were 11 women. They played all or part of 38 seasons in the league. The shortest career was Martha Torchy Walker, 9 days. The longest was Irene. Well, when she joined the league, she was called Tuffy Hickson. When she left the league, she was the last player from Chattanooga, and they called her Choo Choo. It also described the way she chugged down the baselines as she was running out a grounder. So collectively, they won 2 league championships, a couple of season championships, 2 MVPs, and 8 All-Star appearances. And we have the honor of having the 2 oldest women to ever play in the league, the oldest being Margie Hood at 29, the second oldest, Irene Hickson, at 27. So that is my basic talk. I intentionally sped through this so that I could let you ask me questions and we could talk in depth about some of these other things. So at this point, I will open it up to the floor. We gonna give my mic, Ken?
You're good.
For any questions? Oh, come on, folks, I was deliberately short.
So,
Dan Feller.
tell me how the league folded and why it folded. Or why there was only that one league in the upper Midwest and nowhere else.
The history professor has just asked me to give a semester
Or
course.
don't, it's okay.
Why it folded? Well, I was a young type. A couple of you might be old enough to remember what was going on in the 50s after the war. The country simply changed. New forms of entertainment came about, and people had cars. They could get out and drive and go where they want. They're not stuck in town. They don't have to stick around for a stay vacation. Taste changed. The economic model changed. Part of it was Wrigley was with it for 2 years with a nonprofit plan to patriotic effort, a war effort to give entertainment to the workers. When the war looked like it was going to be over, he sold it to a corporation that was for profit with the same model. That wasn't working because this individual clubs, which were backed, they're sort of franchises, but they're not. At this point, the really big difference between men's baseball and women's baseball that made a difference on a business model side is that in Major League Baseball, the clubs own the players' contracts. In this league, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League owned the contracts of the players, not the individual teams, which meant that the president of the league could reach into your roster, snatch out a player, and put it on another team if they felt there was a competitive disadvantage going on that they needed to correct, so that they had 4 competitive teams on the field instead of 1 that was beating everybody up. Well, that model wasn't working for the local teams, obviously, because they would lose players they liked. In 1950, the clubs became independent franchises, and they started acting like the major league, and they couldn't get along too well. So they had some business problems there, and then the culture shifted on them. That's the closest thing to an explanation. Sir?
Talk about the transition of going from underhand pitching to overhand.
Oh, well. Another thing that happened with this league that makes it really challenging is that they were constantly tweaking the rules. When it started, they were playing with men's baseball rules on a diamond that was larger than softball and smaller than baseball, with underhand pitching only. And they stuck to that. They loosened it up a little bit. In 1947, they changed the rules so that you could go sidearm. This is why Doris Sands became an MVP. She was taught to pitch by her grandfather, Holly Moore, who was a semi-pro player who pitched sidearm. These women had never seen sidearm pitching. They didn't know how to adjust to it. It took them a little while, which is why she was so dominant and why in 1948 she was back to being just another good pitcher instead of the dominant pitcher. Then they went to overhand, and this is what you saw happen. Mary Nesbitt, who was a dominant pitcher, underhand softball, did not like how much it hurt to throw overhand, and she quit pitching. She actually took a break from baseball. Other reasons for that. She came back with another club as a first baseman. She's left-handed. So you see a variety of experiences with the pitchers. Some of them quit pitching because they just couldn't tolerate the motion. They didn't grow up pitching that way. You know, you change your arm motion when you're 20 years old, it's gonna hurt. It ain't like you're 5 and you can, mend easy. As far as the players, well, if you look at the collective batting averages, you think, geez, most of them are under the Mendoza line. If you know what that is, a 200 batting average. But they are playing with a fat ball. They never got down to the diameter of a baseball. The 9.5 inches, I believe it is. I think they got down to maybe 10.5. It's the smallest ball. Doesn't sail as far, hard to hit. So batting averages were pretty poor. A lot of these women just could not adjust well to the new motions and the new pitching. The ones that did, it exceeded and went on. A lot of them just left the league and pitchers changed. Sir?
This predates your focus today, but are you familiar with a pitcher named Jackie Mitchell?
Oh, who doesn't know about Jackie Mitchell, the legendary Chattanooga girl who struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig back to back? Yeah, she's in the exhibit. You can go read about her in there. Patrick, do you have a question?
Yeah, you showed a lot of support for these women within the local community. Did they face any opposition within Knoxville, Reeves, Tennessee to beating what was predominantly a kind of a male perceived sport?
Not at this time, but in the mid-30s when softball started taking off, there was limited pushback. you have to think about the country in the 1930s. We're in the depth of the Depression. You know, 1933, I think 25% of the workforce was out of work. We really didn't recover until we got on a war footing and started going up. There were a lot of people with no coin in their pocket if they had a job, and nothing much to do with it if they did. So softball became essential, and many communities really doubled down on pushing softball to give the people something to do. And, you know, old white dudes like the objective. No, that girls shouldn't be doing this. They should be home having babies and taking care of the men. Small amount of that. You know, there's no doubt that Wrigley was patriarchal and sexist within the institutionalized sexism. There are people who would say that the language that I've been using today, the way I'm switching back and forth between first names, last names, and whatnot, is sexist in the way I'm talking about the women. It's really a question of your attitude. But when I talk about the women being tight-lipped, there were some problems. And there was a manager from Tennessee who got fired for behaving inappropriately with the girls. That's the best I can do, because they ain't talking. It took a lot of work to figure out which one he became infatuated with, but he had to go. It's just, you can't find the stories. They're not in the memoirs. The newspaper accounts are. He was inexperienced with working with women. One got a little closer to the truth and said he was infatuated with a player. Brent, did you have a question?
Did you do much looking into where they played in the city? I found several ballparks, but I don't think I found them all.
No, I didn't. Caswell Park was a big location for most of these games. Not really my particular focus. There is some, I don't know, Adam, how much do we have about local ballparks in the exhibit here?
We
didn't really get into it. It's a little esoteric, but I know your love of it. Yes?
Okay, so I'm a newbie here, but was there a big city softball league that a lot of these girls came from, or did they just?
Yes and no. You know, we're a mid-sized city. Mid-sized is like a small city. A lot of men's leagues, maybe a half a dozen different ones, softball and baseball leagues. There were, it's hard to tell. I think there may have been as many as 8 women's teams doing 2 leagues locally. There was the recreational league, and then there was the industrial league. We're a mill town here, so there were, I don't know how many mill factories turning out garments and different things like that. They sponsored teams, so there was that, and then there were the recreational one where Cole Nelson's Cafe, that's in the recreational league. But then the mills, they're in a different league, and sometimes they're all put together depending on how many teams get filled. So it kind of varied. But it was pretty vibrant, and one thing you'll find is quite interesting. If you do historical research, you need to pay attention to things like this. There are 2 newspapers in this town. Only one reported on softball.
Which one?
The one that sponsored it. You understand? The other paper's not going to advertise their competitor's success. Anyone else? Yes?
Did they, how much of this ball was played on 9-foot base spacing?
None.
None, okay, all 60?
Never got to a full men's league dimension. I have not gone into that because it changes so much, you know. So the reality of it is that for the purist, they never played men's baseball because the field was never the same size and the ball was never the same size. But by the end of the game, that was the only 2 differences. And I think they were out to like 55 feet on the base pads, and 10 and a half inches on the ball. Otherwise, they played hardball. Believe me, on the field, they were competitors. And off the field, they stood shoulder to shoulder as a band of sisters, if I may borrow the phrase. Anything else?
I'd say that the underhand speed of the girls back then weren't quite what it is today, but it wasn't slow pitch by any means.
I really have no way of judging, but I would ask how much faster are men's pitching from that time to this time? How much have our bodies changed and adapted so that our mechanics can speed the ball up? All right, well, I want to close just by thanking you for coming out today. If you haven't already gone to the baseball exhibit, please take some time to tour through there. And once again, thank you.